I still remember the smell of the sea that morning, that mix of salt, sunscreen, and faint sweetness from the beach cafe nearby. It clung to everything, my hair, my clothes, even my breath. The air felt heavy with heat, the kind that makes you both alive and slightly delirious. I had come to the resort alone, a spontaneous decision after a messy breakup and too many sleepless nights. I told myself it would be a week to clear my head. I didn't expect to meet anyone, especially not him. His name was Daniel. I noticed him on my second day there, sitting at the edge of the water with a sketchbook in his lap. He was drawing something. The waves, I thought at first, but when I walked closer, I realized it was people. The beachgoers, the lifeguard tower, even the shadows under umbrellas. There was something captivating about how focused he was, like the rest of the world didn't exist. I don't know what possessed me, but I said something like, "You make them look more peaceful than they actually are." He looked up and smiled. That kind of slow, disarming smile that makes you forget the rest of your sentence. We talked for a while. His voice was calm, low. The kind that pulls you in without trying. I learned he was an architect from Lisbon on a sabbatical after burning out from work. He asked about me, and for once I didn't give the usual polished version of my life. I told him the truth, that I'd just ended a long relationship, that I was tired of pretending I was okay. He didn't flinch. He didn't give me advice or pity. He just nodded as if he understood exactly what it meant to be empty. That night we met again at the small bar by the pier. The ocean was dark and endless behind us, the kind of backdrop that makes everything feel cinematic. We talked until the place closed, then walked barefoot along the shoreline. I remember the sound of the waves crashing, how the moonlight caught the wet sand, and how close his hand brushed mine. Every time it happened, my heart jumped like a spark waiting to catch fire. When he kissed me, it wasn't planned. There was no hesitation. It was desperate, almost clumsy, like two people trying to breathe through each other. The world went silent except for the sea. I remember thinking this isn't supposed to happen, and yet I didn't pull away. The next few days blurred into something that felt unreal. We spent our mornings swimming, our afternoons wandering through narrow streets and forgotten cafes, our nights tangled in sheets that smelled of salt and sweat. Everything about him felt magnetic. He had this way of looking at me like I was something fragile and infinite all at once, and maybe that's why I fell, because for the first time in a long time I felt seen. I knew I was in trouble when even silence with him felt full. When I started counting hours between our moments apart, he'd sketch me sometimes, tracing the line of my shoulder or the curve of my mouth with his pencil, as if memorizing me. Once he said, "You look like someone who's always waiting for something she can't name." I laughed, but the words haunted me. Still, something about him didn't fit perfectly. He avoided certain topics, like what exactly he'd left behind in Lisbon or why he sometimes stared at his phone with that flicker of guilt in his eyes. I noticed it, but I didn't ask. I was too afraid of breaking whatever fragile miracle we were living inside. Maybe I already knew, deep down, that some loves are built on borrowed time. On the fifth night, he whispered, "Don't fall in love with me." He said it with a half smile, like a joke, but his eyes didn't match his tone. I should have listened, but I just smiled back and said, "Too late." I don't think I've ever felt time move so strangely as it did that week. Days melted into each other like waves that crash, fade, and return again. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in bruised golds and pinks, Daniel found me sitting alone by the bar that overlooked the beach. The air smelled of salt and coconut oil, and the sea breeze clung to my skin like a whisper I didn't want to lose. He didn't say anything at first, just sat beside me, close enough for our knees to brush. I felt that spark again, that quiet electricity that hummed beneath every word we hadn't yet spoken. "You always look like you're waiting for something," he said finally, his voice low and rough like he'd swallowed the sea. "Maybe I am," I replied. He smiled, and that was all it took. That night, we walked barefoot along the shoreline, the moon spilling silver across the waves. He told me about his life back home, a city far away, a job he didn't love, a relationship that had ended months ago but still haunted his thoughts. "I came here to forget," he said. "So did I whispered. At some point, our hands found each other's. It wasn't deliberate. It was as if the night itself had reached down and tangled our fingers together. When he leaned in to kiss me, I didn't stop him. I didn't want to. His lips were soft, hesitant, then hungry. I could taste the salt of the ocean and the faint bitterness of the rum we'd shared. The next few nights blurred into something that felt like a dream too vivid to be real. We'd meet after dark, by the pool, on the sand, or in his room with the curtains drawn tight against the world. The sound of the waves outside became the rhythm of us. He made me feel alive again, like I'd been asleep for years and only now remembered how it felt to breathe. We didn't talk much about what would happen when the week ended. It was easier to pretend that it wouldn't. I remember one night especially, the storm. The sky had turned wild and violet, lightning slashing the horizon. We ran through the rain laughing like children, drenched and breathless. He pulled me against him under a palm tree, both of us shaking from the cold and something deeper. His forehead rested against mine, and for a moment the world was nothing but the sound of rain on our skin. "I don't want this to end," I said. "It doesn't have to," he answered, but I saw it in his eyes, an uncertainty he couldn't hide, something distant, something withheld. The next morning I woke alone. The sheets were still warm, but his suitcase was gone. No note, no goodbye. Just the sound of waves outside and a hollow in my chest that felt too wide for my ribs to contain. I found him that evening near the pier, talking to a woman I hadn't seen before. She was beautiful in a quiet, polished way, her hand resting on his arm like it had always belonged there. They were laughing, the kind of laugh that only comes from history. When he saw me, his smile faltered. The woman turned and looked at me, confusion crossing her face. I didn't need to ask who she was. I already knew. He came to me later, his voice low, pleading, but I didn't hear the words. I only remember the sound of the waves crashing behind him over and over like they were trying to wash away what we'd done. That night I stood at the edge of the water, the surf lapping at my ankles. My heart ached in a way I didn't know it could. I thought of how quickly something beautiful could rot beneath the surface, how love could become a lie so quietly you almost missed it happening, and for the first time since I'd arrived, I wanted to go home. I didn't leave the resort right away. I told myself I needed closure, but really, I think I was waiting for him to make it right, for him to come find me and say the things I wanted to hear, that what we had was real, that I wasn't just another mistake he made while trying to forget his past. The days felt heavy, like I was walking through water. The same ocean that had felt like freedom now mocked me with its endless calm. I saw him sometimes, always from a distance, at breakfast by the pool, laughing with her. I learned her name was Isabella and that they were engaged. When I heard that, something inside me cracked so sharply that I could almost hear it. One evening, I found him alone near the pier where we'd first kissed. The sky was painted with that soft orange pink that makes everything look too beautiful to be real. He turned when he saw me, and for a moment, the air was so thick with tension that it felt like the world was holding its breath. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. My voice shook. He rubbed his hands over his face, sighing like the truth itself was exhausting. "I didn't plan for this to happen," he said. "I thought I could control it. I thought I could control it. I thought what we had could stay here. Stay here," I repeated. "Like some souvenir you pick up and leave behind," he winced. "It wasn't like that." Then what was it? He didn't answer. And that silence, that awful, hollow silence, told me everything I needed to know. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The waves crashed at our feet, the wind tugged at my hair, and I realized how small we both were compared to the sea that stretched endlessly before us. "I love her," he said finally, and the words hit harder than any storm could. "But I think I loved you too, just in a different way." It was the cruelest kind of honesty, the kind that offers no comfort, no redemption, just truth, sharp and cold. I walked away before he could say anything else. I didn't want to cry in front of him. I wanted to keep at least that small dignity for myself. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about every moment, every touch, every word, replaying them like pieces of a movie I couldn't stop watching. It was all tainted now. Every memory felt rewritten by what I knew. The next morning I packed my bags. But before leaving, I went down to the beach one last time. The sun was rising, staining the horizon gold, and the tide was high. I stood where the water could reach my toes and whispered the words I never got to say to him. "I would have loved you better," I said softly, though he wasn't there to hear it. "If you'd only let me." A single wave crashed at my feet, soaking the hem of my dress. It felt like a final kiss goodbye. On the flight home, I stared out the window, watching the ocean fade beneath the clouds. Part of me wished I'd never met him, that I could erase the pain, but another part, the quieter, crueler part, knew that I wouldn't trade it. Because for a few nights I had felt something real, something that burned so brightly it left a scar. And scars, I've learned, are just another way of remembering that we once lived fully, even if it ended in ashes. Would you like me to continue with part 4, where she tries to rebuild her life, only to face an unexpected message that reopens the wound? 2 months passed before I could breathe without feeling that tightness in my chest. Life slowly began to move again, or maybe I just learned to fake it better. I went back to work, smiled when I had to, and filled my evenings with anything that distracted me from thinking about him. But grief isn't linear. It loops, it haunts, it hides in the smallest things. the smell of sunscreen, the sound of waves in a commercial, even the way sunlight hits a window. Every little thing could drag me back to that resort, to him, to us. I told myself I was healing. I told everyone else the same. But then one rainy afternoon an email arrived. The subject line was simple. I'm sorry for a long time. I couldn't open it. My heart was pounding like it somehow knew that nothing good could come from what was inside. But curiosity, or maybe masochism, won out. He wrote, I don't expect you to forgive me. I just need you to know that everything I said was real, even if I didn't deserve to say it. I made choices I can't undo. Isabella left me. She found out about us. I thought losing her would destroy me, but it turns out what really haunts me is losing you. I stared at the screen, unable to breathe. The part of me that had once begged for those words, for any sign that I had mattered, wanted to feel vindicated, but all I felt was emptiness. He continued, I'm coming back to the coast next week. I'll be staying at the same resort. If you ever want to see me, even just to yell at me, I'll be there. I closed my laptop and sat in silence. The sound of the rain tapping against the window filled the room like a heartbeat. Did I want to see him? Every rational part of me screamed no, but somewhere deep inside, in the place where pain and love blur into the same color, I felt that dangerous pull again. That need for closure, for answers, for something I didn't even have a name for anymore. A week later, I found myself at the train station with a small suitcase and a ticket to the coast. I told my friends I needed a break, a little vacation. I didn't tell them the truth, that I was about to reopen the wound I had spent months trying to stitch shut. The resort looked the same salty air, the same curve of the beach, the same sound of laughter drifting from the bar at night. It felt like stepping into a memory that hadn't moved on, even though I had tried to. I saw him that evening. He was sitting at our spot by the pier, staring out at the horizon. His face looked older somehow, not in years, but in weight. When he turned and saw me, his eyes widened like he hadn't truly believed I'd come. You came, he said quietly. I shouldn't have, I replied. We sat there in silence for a while. The sea was calm, deceptively so, like it was holding back a storm. Finally, he said, I thought about you every day. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I needed you to know it. I wanted to yell at him. I wanted to tell him how he had broken something in me that no apology could fix. But when I looked at him, all I saw was a man haunted by his own mistakes, and I realized that I didn't hate him anymore. Why did you call me back here? I asked. He hesitated. Because I can't move on. I thought maybe if I saw you again, I could understand what I ruined. I stood up, the sand cool beneath my bare feet. You didn't just ruin something, I said softly. You ended it. And I think that's what I need to understand, that some endings are final. His expression broke, and for a moment I almost reached out. But then I remembered what it felt like to cry myself to sleep, to doubt my worth, to carry the ghost of someone who had chosen someone who had chosen someone else. I hope you find peace, I said, and turned away. Behind me, the waves crashed, loud, endless, eternal. That night, I didn't look back once, but as I lay in bed, I realized something strange. For the first time in months, I didn't feel broken. I felt clean, like the ocean had finally washed away the pieces of him I'd been clinging to. Or maybe it was just the calm before the next storm. I left the resort before sunrise the next morning. The sky was soft and gray, and the air had that heavy stillness right before a storm. My suitcase wheels whispered across the boardwalk as the waves rolled in behind me. Steady, rhythmic, final. It should have been over. I told myself it was over. I had faced him, seen the wreckage of what we were, and walked away. That was closure, wasn't it? But closure is a cruel illusion. It never really ends cleanly. It just hides beneath the surface, waiting for something small, a word, a scent, a sound, to tear the wound open again. 2 days after I got home, I received a letter, an actual, physical letter, not an email, not a text. The handwriting on the envelope stopped me cold. I knew it instantly. I almost didn't open it, but my fingers acted before my mind could stop them. Inside, there was a single page. The ink was smudged in places like it had been written in haste or through tears. I didn't want you to find out like this, it began. But there's something I need to say before it's too late. I'm sick. I've been sick for a while. I didn't tell you because I didn't want your pity, and I didn't tell Isabella because she wouldn't have stayed if she knew. Maybe that makes me a coward. Maybe it makes me human. But when I met you, I felt alive again. You made me forget for a while that my time was running out. I read those words over and over. They blurred until I couldn't tell where the ink ended and my tears began. He went on. That night we met by the water. I knew you were too good for the mess I'd drag you into, but I couldn't stay away. You made the world brighter, and when I betrayed you, it wasn't because I stopped caring. It was because I didn't know how to handle loving someone I'd never be able to. Shh, he ended with, if you ever come back to the coast, look for the little cove behind the rocks where the seaweed grows thick. I left something there for you. If the waves haven't taken it, it's yours. I dropped the letter and just sat there, shaking. Anger, sorrow, disbelief, they all hit at once. Was this another manipulation? Another trick to make me feel something for him again? But the pain in his words felt too raw, too real. 3 days later, I was back at the coast. I told myself it was for closure. Again, maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't. The beach was almost empty when I arrived. The tide was low, the sky pale and windless. I found the cove after an hour of walking, half convinced this was a fool's errand. But there, half buried in sand between two stones, was a small wooden box. Inside was a seashell, smooth white and gleaming faintly, and a folded photograph of us, taken without me realizing it. We were laughing, holding drinks, the sunlight catching his eyes. And behind the photo, one last note. I wanted to give you something that doesn't fade. The sea takes everything eventually, but maybe this can remind you that for one brief, impossible summer we were real. Don't remember me for how it ended. Remember me for how it ended. Remember me for how it felt. I sat there until the tide began to rise, the waves reaching my feet like they wanted to take the box back. I thought about throwing it into the sea, letting the ocean keep what it had started, but instead I held it tight, because love, even broken love, leaves traces. It changes the shape of who we are, and maybe that's what he meant, that even if time erases everything else, some moments live on in the person we become afterward. As I walked away from the cove, the first drops of rain began to fall. The wind picked up, the sea grew louder, and I swear, in that sound I could almost hear his voice, not asking for forgiveness, not saying goodbye, just whispering, thank you.